Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Could proceed from now, member.
Thank you. Thank you. As I listened to the honourable member who preceded me, it was very clear that he doesn't know the reality of the quality of life of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And before I say more, I think it is important for us to remember the motion that has been brought before this House for debate. Because the honourable member seemed to have completely neglected the motion and went off on his own merry chase, looking and finding ghosts behind every post. So permit me, Mr. Speaker, to read the motion and to congratulate and thank the honourable member for Shogunas East. And I endorse the comments made by the honourable member. So here we are with a motion dealing with the quality of life, the high cost of living, and so on. And the motion reads as follows. Whereas it is the responsibility of the government to ensure the well-being of its citizens by facilitating a decent standard of living and quality of life, and whereas the impending increase in utility rates and the imminent imposition of property taxes will further escalate the cost of living and the inflation rate, and whereas the consistent increases in fuel prices have further negatively impacted the cost of living, and whereas this government has failed to take positive measures to cushion the economic fallouts brought about by escalating prices of essential goods and services, be it resolved that this House call on the government to outline its short, medium, and long-term strategies to systematically reduce the escalating and uncontrollable increase in the price of essential goods and services assessed by the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And be it further resolved that this House call on the government to take the necessary urgent action to immediately remedy the negative effects upon those living below the poverty line. So we listened to the honourable member, and nothing within his contribution was directly related and relevant to the issues raised by my colleague from Shogunas East. And you know, listening to him at the start, it says the motion as presented, as piloted by Shogunas East, failed to take into account what is happening worldwide, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So here it is, was blame Kamla and the UNC. Now you go to blame the whole world because of what is happening in the world. And then you ended up by calling on Superior, blame Kamla again. But I'm not taking that blame, not today. Because you want to say to Shogunas East, you put no forward, no plans, no proposals, nothing. We have done that time and time again. But it is your job. You are the government. You took charge. You're in charge now. And it is your job, based on this motion, to tell us what are your plans, what are your strategies for dealing with issues in the public domain impacting on the lives of citizens, on the quality of lives of citizens in our land. And the government talked about the school feeding program. Remember? The member spoke of several things he says the government is doing, but fails to tell us that school feeding program was there before them, before this government came into office. Fails to tell us that they have reduced that program, a program to help the poor children in this country. They reduced it, they reduced the funding. In the same way, they have reduced the GATE program to help people access proper education. Member speaks about salary relief grants, talks about food boxes, other programs that they put into place, but again doesn't tell us all that has stopped now. They have stopped all those programs to assist people, to help those who would be in need. All of that has stopped. And so, talking about water tanks, talk to my MPs. Any of your constituents got any water tank? Right now in Pilan, in my constituency, no water in the taps for weeks upon weeks. In other constituencies, members of boldface and barface to talk about water tank. So no plan, no program, no policies of how to improve the quality of life, and therefore resting back on the laurels of past things that happened. You met the school feeding program. What did you do? Come to tell us you're feeding children, when in fact you have broken down, you've stopped it. You stopped the food box program. That stopped. You mentioned that. As something you're doing, you stopped it. You talk about phase 1, income support, salary relief grant, food support. Persons still have not received the promised grants under these heads. And of course, those have also stopped, Mr. Deputy Speaker. When you talk about the water tanks, I've mentioned that. All talk speaks of effectiveness of this water tank program. Yes, it's a great program. I'm glad for those who got it. But the majority of those who need it have not received it. And up to today, as I speak, my constituents and many others in the Trinidad and Tobago are suffering for lack of water. So, school feeding program, in 2015, over $250 million, the last year we were in office, spent on the school feeding program. Today, $136 million by 2019. The COVID year saw no help for students during that time. So these are idle boasts, empty boasts by the honourable member on the other side who spoke. And then the minister goes into a whole tirade about the RIC. And it appeared to me that he was building and making a case for increasing the utility rates. Telling us in the Caribbean, we have the lowest rate for water and the lowest rate for electricity, blah, 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 blah. We have the lowest. So his contribution was not about to help people, but it was about how to increase prices and bring further hardship. So I reject outright the allegations made by that honourable member about the conduct and behaviour of persons attending the RIC consultations. I reject that outright as untrue. Members of the public attend those consultations, and they voice their frustration, they voice their concerns, and I don't know how you could say it's a UNC. I don't know if they were wearing UNC t-shirts. I don't know if it was emblazoned on their forehead, look, I'm a UNC and I'm behaving bad. How could you tell they were UNC people? How do you know when members of the public come because they're so fed up and frustrated and worried, you are saying they were UNC? Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Members, please. Right, each one will have the opportunity. No, please, Couva South. Point up here. Hold on. Again, all members will have the opportunity to enter the debate, right, for this particular motion. So, please, proceed.
I thank you. Honourable Deputy Speaker. Okay, you'll have your turn to speak, sir.
Members, I only recognize the member for Superior at this time. Proceed, member.
Thank you. I am making the point that the allegation that they have UNC people behaving badly and their conduct and calling on the member of Superior to rein in her colleagues and so on. Yes, there were some MPs, some colleagues were in those consultations, but you cannot ascribe the kind of conduct you're saying as the UNC, and as the UNC, they were members of the public. And I want to remind you, Deputy Speaker, because I know you have a good eye and ear for history. We celebrate how many years today? Or yesterday, yeah.
Okay, no, members, please, members on both sides. No, member for Couva South, I'm on my legs. MP for Princestown. Members on both sides, please. Member for Naprima, thanks. Right, members on both sides. Proceed, honourable member.
I thank you again. Honourable Deputy Speaker. And I'm saying that we disassociate from those who are saying it, and I was saying, we celebrate either yesterday or today the water rats, if you say you want to celebrate those, but I want to remind the government of those water rats in 1903. 1903, and if there are people out there who are doing electricity rates, the minister signaled that WASA has sent numbers for increasing water rates as well. Hey, go, as I say, hasten slowly. Because the population, the majority, are living at breaking point in terms of the economy, in terms of their being able to purchase food and to help themselves and help their families. So we have to go hasten slowly, as I said. The member said that they have zero-rated some items in terms of VAT, value-added tax. That is one of the greatest hoaxes ever of this government, who came in to say we're reducing VAT from 15% to what? 12%. But then you put it across the line, across the board. We had over 7,000 food items, zero-rated. So that is, it's giving with the left hand, as they say, or give it the right hand and take it back with the left hand. So I'm not buying this zero rating in terms of the VAT items. And then the honourable member talked to us about, he wants facts and figures. Member for Chaguanas East had no facts or figures. I wonder if he has any, the honourable member, if he does have any of those facts and figures. Because if he does, he will see the facts and the figures are totally against his reading and viewing of the population in Trinidad and Tobago. Totally contrary to what the member is saying. Totally contrary to wanting to attack members on this side as painting us in a dark place. And so we are in a dark place. Trinidad and Tobago is in a dark hole. And people are indeed suffering. So what is one set of data that you can use, facts and figures that can be used, that the member says Chaguanas East did not present? Chaguanas East gave us the narrative and so on. Others will come and will speak. Let me give you some of that data. One indicator of whether people are able to sustain themselves and their families has to do with whether they have a job or they do not have a job. Since this government came into office, thousands of persons have lost their jobs. Thousands of persons. There are two measures here now, two areas where we get data with respect to employment numbers, jobs, and so on in the country, none of which is totally up to date, but we can at least use some of that data, Honourable Deputy Speaker. There is CSO data and there is NIB data, which gives us an inclination, an idea of what's happening with jobs in Trinidad and Tobago. The latest CSO data on the number of persons employed up to the third quarter of 2022 was 563,400 persons. However, when we look at the last quarter of 2015, we would see that there were more persons than employed. In other words, from 2015 to now, over 65,000 persons have lost their jobs under this government up to last year. Over 65,000. This is CSO data, central bank data. This is not Kamla's data or any of us. This is the CSO data telling us over 65,000 persons have lost their jobs. Now, CSO data is not a real figure. How they operate, they use an estimated number. So estimated by CSO, over 65,200 persons have lost their jobs since this government came into office. The NIB data gives us another figure, which might be closer to the truth, because what it does, it is based on persons paying into the NI system and so on, and you don't pay if you're not employed, so they pay persons employed. When we look at NIB data, the data shows that the pandemic, pre-pandemic, there were 112,000 persons had dropped out. Pre-pandemic, So when a member came to talk about the whole world suffering with the pandemic and the COVID, blame COVID, everything is blame COVID, well, the COVID gone, whom are you blaming now? You're going back again to blaming Kamla and the UNC. So 112,000, more than 112,000 persons had dropped off the employment roll as of June 30, 2020. 112,000 had dropped off the roll. CSO is telling us, okay, estimated 65,200 persons lost jobs. NIB data tells us 112,000 persons, 112,800 people had lost their jobs. What does that mean? When a person loses their job, what happens to the family? In most cases, that person is the sole breadwinner for that family to take care of wife, children, sometimes grandchildren. What happens in that home if you do not have a job? All the income support grants that the minister spoke about, all the salary relief grants the minister spoke about, all those programs have shut down. I mentioned it before. Shut down. So when you send a man home, you know, there's nothing harder for a man in a house or a woman. We have a lot of single mothers who are the working winners, breadwinners of their families. When they lose their job, do you know what it is for that person to go home to wonder, what are they going to give your children to eat? That there is no, how hard, what are you going to put on the table for them to eat? And when a member speaks so glibly, they don't have a clue to what is happening in this country amongst the poor people, you know, don't have a clue. Don't have a clue. Member for Chaguanas East raised some of the headlines in the newspapers, and this has been ongoing, the cry, the lamentation of people suffering because of not having a job, not being able to put food on the table. So whether we use NIB stats or whether we use the CSO stats, there are more than 65,000 persons under this government who have lost their jobs. As I say, without a job, how do you provide food and basic essentials for your family? How do you pay if you're a renter? How do you pay that rent? How do you pay a mortgage? Because all those support systems, which were not fully implemented under the COVID, everything has gone. How are you going to be able to send your children properly dressed, properly resourced with the books and the equipment that they need, with the clothing that they need? So we see this level of joblessness. And what does the government have to say about how you will help those families now who are in jeopardy, who are in need? Minister did not spend a word telling us that. All these jobless people, how are you going to help them? How are you going to create jobs, sustainable jobs? Not a word. And this is where the member for Chaguanas East said, tell us your strategies in the short term and the medium term, in the long term to deal with the concerns. And then wants to point fingers at that by saying, hey, what is the role of the opposition? What is the role, the member is asking, the role of the opposition? The role of the opposition includes what we are attempting to do here today. That is part of the role of the opposition, to raise the concerns of people, the citizenry, our constituents, and to demand answers from the government. Again, once more, no such answers were forthcoming. When we look at prices now, I talked about the joblessness, the amount of thousands of jobs lost. We could look at, Minister says he wants facts and figures, let's look at the prices, because that's what we talked about in the motion, substantive motion. We asked about the issue of increasing cost of living. It has to do with several things, food prices, for example. So in spite of mass joblessness under this government and their mismanagement of the economy, prices continue to rise. Annual food prices increased by almost 14% at last count by November 2022, last year. This means that if you were spending $2,000 as a family on all your food for the month, you would have had to shell out more money. That increased by 14%. This is at a time where citizens cannot find jobs. It seems that you're always reading, you pick up the newspaper about retrenchments and people losing jobs and businesses is closing down. If we look at the newspapers, Deputy Speaker, the food price increases are beyond crisis levels for many families. This is a reality borne out when we examine the newspaper headlines such as 45.9% increase in food. That's like doubling, 45.9% increase in food, no thank you, in food from 2015 to 2022. From when we left office to today, 2022, in the Express reported from an economist on January 18, 2023. 45.9% increase in food. Another headline from the Express, 3rd December 22, prices sky high. A Newsday article from Ria Chetram carries a foreboding message from the government, 31st March 22 reading, Trade Mystery, food price hikes coming soon. The minister, when he spoke, the honourable member, he told us the Minister of Trade will come to tell us about what the Ministry of Trade is doing about the matters raised in this motion. But here it is, article from carrying on a message, March 31, 22. Trade Ministry, the Trade Ministry saying food price hikes coming soon. Another article from the Newsday, Wednesday, 18 January, this year, 2023, by Elizabeth Gonzalez, headline, Public on High Food Prices. We can't tighten belts anymore. And it goes on. There's a food price crisis in this country. The government can follow the Minister of Finance and play with words, as he did when he was asked about the foreign exchange crisis. Instead of choosing to label it a shortage, if they wish, he did a spin on it otherwise. And the issue does not disappear. What is constant is that families are in distress and they demand a proper response to bring relief from a government which has demonstrated it is not prepared to provide same. We on the side, we are saying, if you cannot listen to the cries of families across the nation, then you know what to do. Get out of office and call the election now. We have been visiting families across the nation, and they're ready, we are ready to bring relief. So whatever you call, whenever you call that election, we shall deliver because we are on the road to victory. The UNC is on the road to victory. Let's look at inflation, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Facts and figures. I didn't say this. This is the data. This is the data that's out there for anybody in the public to see. Data from the central bank on the inflation rate. And we all know what inflation is. The increase in prices. Increase in the cost of living. So let's look at inflation. Inflation has risen the most this year since this government came into office. And you don't have COVID now. You don't have the COVID blame game excuse anymore. Inflation has risen. Central bank data in their January bulletin this year, January 2023, the central bank tells us that inflation has increased the most since this government came into office. Let's look at meat, for example. Another basic item in most diets, meat, protein, you need that. The data tells us from the central bank in January of this year, reported, at November 22, stood at 10% about increase in meat, the cost, the price, the food of meat. This means chicken, poultry. This means beef, pork, goat, other protein items, meats, a 10% increase. When we look at fuel and lubricants, again, the central bank tells us there has been a 35.4% increase in fuel and lubricants in this country. Recall when the Minister of Finance sat in a nice big padded armchair and was laughing. He said, I've raised this thing, the fuel price, so many times, and they ain't riot yet. Do you all remember that? They haven't rioted yet. It was a big joke how many times we raised it. But according to the central bank, fuel and lubricant prices rose last year by more than 35%, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And what would that mean? It means everything that depends on transport, every item is also going to be increased. Because everything that you have to buy or sell, you will need fuel for transporting the items from one place to the next. And that has had a serious effect as well on the cost of living. So for transport prices then, there has been a 14.6% increase on transport prices. That should come as no surprise to anyone, because once again, because of the increased price of fuel. They are satisfied, government is satisfied. As long as citizens do not riot, they're happy with that. Never mind the hardship that persons are undergoing. I move along. Milk and cheese, and this part of my contribution is saying that with the increase in prices, there is more hardship. The cost of living has increased. Again, I'm using the data from the central bank. Honourable Minister, take note. You want facts, you want figures. According to the central bank, the general price of milk, cheese, and eggs rose by more than 27%. 27%. This was because the price index increased from 99.1 in September 2015. I go back, that's when we left office. From September 2015, that price index was 99.1, and now in November 22, which is when we last have data for, the price index is 126.3, an increase, as I say here, in eggs and milk, cheese, dairy products, 27%. Overall, in food prices, citizens have been facing an onslaught in food price increases. Just last year, food prices rose by 14.5% from January to November, last year alone. Over the 7.5 years of this government, food prices increased by 33%, overall food prices, with the food price index rising from 104.1 now to, an increase in the price index, food price index, by 33%. It is what this means then is that citizens were paying $1,000 to $2,000 for food every month when we left office. They would now, because of the increases, be paying up to $700, $350, and so on. They'll be paying a lot more, increase on what they were already paying. We must recognize that these food price increases are in the face of over the 100,000 I mentioned of persons having lost their jobs. And public servants being offered, what, 4%? 4% salary increases. So whilst prices are skyrocketing, you're not seeing commensurate increases for salaries for the public servants in our country. Ultimately, public servants took the 4% increase, and it is clear that they will not even be able to cover the increase in food prices alone. I've given you food price index up to over 30% and so on. You're getting a 4% increase in salary. How are you going to cover these increases? Prices effective Monday, 6 February 2023. The nation experienced a hike in the price of eggs, and we know for many, eggs constitute a basic food item. The announcement was that eggs would rise in price by $3. However, this is from the egg producers to the supermarket, so you have an increase of $3, but then the supermarket will have a further write-up added to the price. So the price of eggs therefore rose by roughly 15%, from $25 to $28, to as high as $29 to $32, an increase of $4 to $5 on the retail end. What caused this increase in egg prices? The Association of Trinidad and Tobago table egg producers reportedly blamed the reason for price increase on the additional cost of fuel, the additional increase in the cost of fuel needed to distribute feed and, of course, the actual supplies of the eggs to the various outlets. The egg producers had faced removal of a fuel subsidy of almost 5%. And we warn that all of this is as a result of government's callous shutdown at Pointe-à-Pierre and of that refinery at Pointe-à-Pierre. This is a consequence of the PNM action of November 2018. 4 years and 2 months later, you're again being forced to pay for the actions of shutting down that refinery. So what does it all mean? What does it mean? This was a government where the Honorable Prime Minister stood on a national platform and told the country the government is not shutting down Petrotrin. And in case you were closing your fridge door and you didn't hear me properly, I repeat, the government is not closing down Petrotrin. And what happened? Soon thereafter, all Petrotrin shut down. All to be sent home. So when they raise the price of fuel now, this is as a result of that closure at Petrotrin, you know, because we now have to buy fuel. What we would be able to produce here and have jobs, created jobs, have people working, we're not producing that. We had to buy, we had to import, we had to find foreign exchange to buy the fuels that we used to produce in this country. And so that price increases. So what does it mean? Citizens last month were once more asked to shoulder another increase in prices for basic items. For many families, they would continue to cut back on food needed for a balanced diet. Your doctor would tell you that eggs are an excellent source of protein, vitamins, and minerals, among health benefits. Eggs help maintain eyesight. We always hear of the wonders of carrots and other roots, but do not overlook eggs. There are many pluses to eggs, but the prices have so increased. Sadly, there are many families who already cannot afford to provide eggs in their diet for their children, and this price hike will, of course, make it even harder for families. The impending increase in electricity rates, the minister spent a lot of time, as I said, justifying increasing the rates, telling us we had not done a consultation in how many years and so on. So his entire contribution on that aspect was the RIC consultations and to bring forward.
Honourable Member, your original time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to complete your presentation, if you so wish.
I thank you very much, Honourable Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. My colleague, who is our shadow person for public utilities, will deal a little more on the points raised about the RSC consultations and what is happening. But I think something is very shocking with all of this is that the revelation is that the RIC, in one of the consultations at the Centre of Excellence, indicated that despite not having an up-to-date household budgetary survey to refer to, they have settled on rate increases as a solution to TNTEC's financial woes. So what they're saying is you have not seen that household budgetary survey to know where people are, to know what they can afford to do, how much more they can pay. Nothing of that. This is one of the responses from the panel at the consultations. Why is the household budgetary survey and the survey of living conditions not important in an exercise like this? The survey of living condition has been utilized as a main source of robust quantitative data to generate key poverty, inequality, and vulnerability indicators and to evaluate living conditions at a point in time. The last such survey was done 9 years ago in 2014 under the government I led. And so we were able to produce so many targeted social interventions, from the milk grant to the laptop program, because we're using current up-to-date data at that time. Household budget surveys are the only truly reliable source of household income and expenditure data, which, when combined with other information that is collected, they will produce a rich source of socio-economic data. We have to be data-driven. We cannot operate by VAPs. Everything that we do should be data-driven to inform our policies and programs as we go forward. In addition to this function, data from the survey have become critical in economic and social policy analyses and development planning. The last household budgetary survey was done in 2008-2009. We are now in what? 2023. Why is it that we are not utilizing or providing or making sure that we can have that kind of data to plan future programs for the people of this country? It is alarming to note that the RSC is going ahead with proposals for rate increases with data that is 9 years old. 9 years old. That data will show that the living conditions are much worse off today than 9 years ago, Madam Speaker. That data is 9 years old. And 14 years old, that's for the survey of living conditions, and 14 years old in terms of the household budgetary survey. How can we operate in this manner? How can we properly plan to help our disadvantaged or challenged citizens or women or children, all our citizens, when we are operating on things that are 14 years old and 9 years old that will be totally irrelevant in today's dark place that Trinidad has become? I asked that question of the government. There's a joint survey of living conditions and household budget being done that's supposed to end in 2024, which is next year. In my respectful view, the RIC must cease and desist from any rate hikes until, or they must first receive the result of the joint survey next year. Don't run ahead on old data, 9 years and 14 years old. Hasten slowly, I say. You're really interfering with the quality of life of the citizens of this land. You don't have long to wait again. Do not rely on 14-year-old data and 9-year-old data. The RIC must not impose electricity rate increases on citizens at this time. They must stop. They must await that. And given how hard it is right now, this is not the time for those rate increases. results of the last household budgetary survey, that last survey, the share of housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels was at 26.5%. Health, education, transport was at 4% and 14.3% respectively. But with the rollback of GATE, the removal of the majority of the fuel subsidy, then there could be an encroaching on disposable income, greater encroachment on your disposable income. Average monthly consumption expenditure in Mayaro, for example, Rio Claro, was just above $5,000 per month, with the highest monthly income available for consumption expenditure being in Diego Martin at $5,700. So the survey is important. The proposed rate increases by electricity usage, again, will bring further hardship on the citizens of our country. So, Madam Speaker, as I said, my colleague, the MP for Princess Town, will deal more on those RIC issues, rate hikes and electricity, and of course there's a plan for WASA as well. Now, the member said, what are our plans? Well, why didn't Shagona see it come and bring plan and bring proposal and bring programs? Why didn't the member do that? I'll answer that in a moment. We have stood in this house and outside this house, and we have shared with the nation our transformation plan, the UNC transformation plan, with matters relating to dealing with matters for a better quality of life, for reduction for prices, for the creation of jobs. We talked about the establishment of a food security fund. So a lot of that is out there, and time will not permit me to deal with that today. But let us take note. And one of the preambles in the motion deals specifically with fuel prices, whereas the consistent increases in fuel prices have further negatively impacted the cost of living. We say the government has betrayed and broken the socio-economic well-being of our nation through the decimation of affordable food prices. I want us to remember 6 fuel price increases in 7 years. This government has imposed 6 fuel price increases in their 7 years of office. 6. And that meant 6 times they've increased the price of fuel. Not once, not twice, not even 3, but 7 times since they came into office. Imagine a nation that was once the energy capital of the Caribbean, a nation with its own refinery, a nation with sold fuel to the entire Caribbean, has now resorted to these increases in the price of fuel in 7 years. In recent months, the minister has been boasting about his fiscal surplus. He boasted about the country earning more than expected revenue in the last fiscal year. But what did the people of the nation get? They got an increase in the price of fuel again last year. When we left office, the price of super fuel was $2.70 per liter. Do you know what it is today, Honorable Madam Speaker? From $2.70 per liter, it is now $6.97, almost $7. When my government left office, the price of diesel was $1.50 per liter. Do you know what it is today? Today it is $4.41 per liter. I mentioned it before that when the price of fuel goes up, every single item of expenditure goes up. The subsidy, we must remember, was a return on investment to the owners of, Subsidy was investment to the owners of oil and gas. That was the citizens. It was part of our patrimony. The whole plan was to share the nation's wealth with citizens, and this is where you got the subsidies on fuel. This is where you had low electricity rates, low water rates, because it was felt that that patrimony, that wealth should be shared with all the citizens of our land. The country must understand that the reason the price of fuel increased, it was not due to any war or the pandemic. Nothing to do with that. This government began removing the fuel subsidy years before pandemic, years before the war. They were already moving that subsidy and, of course, putting it wherever they wanted to spend. So as I have a few minutes left, I want to very clearly support and endorse what my colleague, the member for Chaguanas East, has shared in this chamber. And I just want to quote from a newspaper article, which was dealing with food prices in the region, and where that article showed us very clearly that in other Caribbean nations, their food prices were lower, and they don't have the benefit that we had. So this is an article, Madam Speaker, newspaper. Expect increase in grocery bills as inflation causes price to soar. This is from The Guardian on the 27th of November, 2022. And they give us some prices here. Country products price. Trinidad and Tobago, and they're using a US price to round it off and make it compatible for comparison. Sliced bread, country TNT, $2.21. Price TTUS, $15. They give us a comparison for condensed milk. They give us for Jamaica sliced bread, $4.45. Condensed milk, $3.27. And it continues with other items of prices. However, Madam Speaker, as I started off, I will end. Under this government, food prices have skyrocketed from when it was in 2015 when we left office. Fuel prices have skyrocketed, and the poverty levels have increased, so much so there's a great deal of suffering taking place in Trinidad and Tobago because of inflation, food price increase, fuel price. I commend again my colleague, Vandana Mohit, honorable member for Chaguanas East. As I said before, I endorse the sentiments in her contribution. I thank you very much, Madam.
Minister of Finance.